Be in gold. Understand what's happening. The world is bifurcating. The Fed needs a higher gold price. I've argued this point in how are you going to balance the budget of the United States? How are you going to pay for that $35 trillion? How are you going to service that? You going to service that with dollars? Really? No, you're going to service that with gold. But you're not going to do it at $2,500 an ounce gold. You're going to do it at $20,000 an ounce gold. Oof. Don't be stupid. Well, I don't know if it's 20,000, maybe 7,000, maybe 9,000, maybe 10,000. It's going to be some number.
Who knows? Yeah.
Right. It's going to be some number. It's going to be a negotiated settlement. And we, as the people who have lost faith in our governments and our institutions, are going to decide what the leverage ratio of the Fed's balance sheet, M2, to our savings is going to be, and the reserve assets are going to be, in order for us to be willing to go back in and buy a U.S. 10-year Treasury note at 4%. I don't know what the gold number is that makes that happen, but it's not going to be $2,500 an ounce.
Hey guys, welcome back to Capital Cause, and today I've got a guest I'm super stoked to have on the show. It is Tom Luongo from the Gold, Goats, and Guns newsletter. Tom, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Danny.
Well, let's just dive right in, Tom. You know, I know probably the vast majority of my audience already knows who you are, Tom, but for those who may not have come across you yet, for whatever reason, kind of give us an intro. Who is Tom Luongo?
Tom Luongo is an asshole. I'm going to sort of just start there. And Tom Luongo also hasn't spoken to a microphone for 4 days, so he's kind of like, because I haven't had any power or sleep. So we'll see where we go today. I'm a guy that used to be a research chemist for like 25 years or so. When you wake up one morning and you're unemployed and you're in your mid 40s and all you have is a BS in chemistry, you're unemployable because you have too much experience to run a laboratory. You have more than enough experience to run a laboratory, but you don't have enough education to get past the HR nanny. And so therefore, you can't get a job. So I took my, passing acquaintance with things like monetary theory and politics and all the things I've been ranting to my friends about to the point where I no longer have any, for years, and then tried to monetize it. Eventually I got picked up by Newsmax after starting writing on Seeking Alpha back in 2013. And just kind of ran with it from there. And we started Gold, Goats, and Guns back in 2017. I ran it into a microphone to nobody for 4 years and 2 or 3 years. And then all of a sudden, boom. Hi, I'm Tom. How are you? And now I'm a Zionist shill. I just want you to know that I've come like full circle. So there it is.
Yeah, I think the term Davos crowd came from you, Tom, right? You're probably the first person I think I've heard say that, and it kind of made its way.
I absolutely coined. I don't care about taking credit for these things because I just want to see the ideas and the memes, percolate into the zeitgeist. As my partner Dexter White and I talk about all the time, our job is to sling pebbles down a mountain and start an avalanche and have them never figure out where the pebbles came from. But yeah, I coined the term the Davos crowd in a blog post back in 2017. I also coined the term Orange Jesus. Like it's nothing new. But I don't really care. As long as these things get out into the zeitgeist, and as long as people run, if they're good ideas, become ungovernable. Orange Jesus. If these ideas percolate, if they're true, they'll percolate. If they're not true, they won't percolate. And that's the point. But when you start to hear, I bet right around 2018, 2019, when I first heard Tucker Carlson use the term Davos, I'm like, I wonder who watches the live streams. There comes a point where you're like, how did this happen? Or who reads Zero Hedge or whatever. So it's just, you never know how this is. I was going to say this now as a lesson to anybody starting out. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I take interview requests from first timers, people I've never spoken to before. For always, I always do. I have a rule: do everybody's show once, right? And if we have a good time, then I'm willing to come back. And I don't care how big your show is or how small it is. But if you're just starting out, no matter what you do, you never have any idea of how big your influence actually is until you are in it long enough to see it come back around and be reflected back upon you. You do the work, you do it honestly, you do it to the best of your ability, and then you let the chips fall where they may. And have an ethos, have a thing, stick to it. And if you keep doing that, eventually you're going to find, one, your audience, two, your voice, and Three, your influence, and whatever the upper limits of those are is up to you. And I'm okay with mine being a certain level and nothing more, because that means that I get to keep slinging pebbles off a mountain and not have the avalanche come down on me. And that's part of the gig that we all have to. Yeah, so it's part of the gig we all have to kind of reconcile with. Like, how big do you want to be? How much money do you want to make? I just enough money that I can keep myself in board games and keep my wife from leaving me. After that, I don't really care. So
yeah, you got to look at it from a net positive or a net negative perspective. People like to look at things from black and white, like, oh, you're either 100% with this or 100% against it. Well, I mean, there's you can either lose your platform and just be completely removed from the game, or you can continue death by 1,000 paper cuts to the enemy.
Well, I'm at the point now where I distrust all forms of purity spiraling. I find I've always despised all religious fundamentalists. When anybody ever asks me, it's like, well, are you an atheist? I'm like, no, I refuse to align myself with any radical group. I leave myself open to the option, open to the possibility that I don't know what I'm talking about a particular subject. And a subject like God is certainly one I don't feel qualified to have a definitive opinion on. But it's the same thing with all issues. Like, no one is all good or all bad. This is something we were writing. We chose as the theme for last month's newsletter, which is like, look, it's that line from Army of Darkness: good, bad, I'm the guy with a gun. And politics comes down to that. And if you're not comfortable with understanding that, it doesn't matter if the guy's a good guy or the bad guy. There are good men who will do bad things for the right reasons, and there are bad men who will do the right thing for the wrong reasons. It doesn't matter, right, what their motivations were ultimately. What matters is what they actually do. One of the things that I took away early on when I first started like hanging out at the Mises Institute website and reading Austrian economics and all this stuff, and some of which I got way too far down the rabbit hole on, and I've since brought it back. But one of the lessons that I learned very early on is that economists don't care about what you say, or at least they shouldn't care about what you say. They only care about what you do. We can only measure your preferences by your actions. So therefore, if you say, yeah, I'm going to take this week's paycheck and go get my child the orthodontics work that he needs done, and you then turn around and blow it on 2/5 of Jack Daniels and a trip to the bar, well, we know what your preferences are. Your preferences are alcohol in the bar, not taking care of your child's orthodontics work. It's just that simple. And you can sugarcoat that however many ways you want, but fuck your feelings. That's not the way this works. Those are your preferences. Make your peace with it, and make peace with the fact that those were the actions you took. And if you're not willing to take responsibility for those actions, well, then guess what? You're never going to actually come into your own as a person and be able to trust your own judgments and your own actions as worthy or unworthy, or anyone else's for that matter. And you're never going to be generous enough to be able to look at somebody else's actions and go, yeah, well, and this is it's so very important that we ground ourselves in that. You're going to wake up one morning and you're going to make we're all going to make really terrible decisions. It happens. I make bad decisions with money all the time. I make bad decisions every day. Right? Maybe coming on this podcast was one of them. I'll find out in hindsight. I kid, of course. But every moment that we're alive is an opportunity for us to make a good decision or a bad decision. Every decision is what it is based on the information we have at that moment in time. Sometimes those decisions are not, the value of those decisions aren't, revealed until later in time. And what were you supposed to do? Judge yourself for your own ignorance. And so we're in a mode, in a place, rhetorically, politically, didactically, culturally, where everybody is so anxious about who to trust, who not to trust. Why does nothing make sense, and why is nothing true? Right? These are the words that are like everywhere. And so everyone's looking for someone that they can just have as, okay, I trust Tom implicitly about everything. Well, that's a bad place to be, because I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to hold opinions that you're not going to agree with. And I'm going to hold positions that you may not agree with, even if my positions are well considered, or have strategic value to me or to my greater purpose or whatever I feel my greater purpose is or whatever. And so at a certain point, we all, it's everybody is, got, no one is pure here. And so I distrust all forms of purity spiraling, which is ultimately where I was going with this. So I don't care if you're a Bitcoin maxi, a hardcore anarcho-capitalist, or libertarian, or a wokenista, or any of these fucking people. I don't give a shit. You're all wrong. Okay, you're all wrong. You're all religious zealots, and you're all purity spiraling out of your own sense of anxiety of over the future, because your time preference, in Misesian speak, has shortened to right here. What's going to happen? And I get it.
By ideology. You're blinded by ideology.
And then you wind up being blinded by ideology, Danny, because your time preference is so shortened because of the fear. Now, guess what? That anxiety, that fear is being pimped at you. It's being stoked on purpose. And so your job is to go, I choose to disbelieve. I'm picking up my 20-sided die. I'm playing friggin' D&D. I choose to disbelieve the illusion. And guess what? My 20-sided die only rolls natural 20s. Fuck you. I don't believe your lies anymore. It's just what you have to do. And what and don't react to the chum that they're constantly throwing into the water. So, I checked out on the whole, for example, the Trump assassination attempt. I'm watching great people spend a lot of time doing great work, trying to forensically go through and figure out whether there's 1 shooter, 2 shooters, 5 shooters, 12 shooters, who was, all of this stuff. I think it's great. I took one look at the footage on Saturday night. I entertained the idea that, this was just a random dude for about 10 minutes. And then I went back to work and said, no, they tried to kill him. That's simple. I don't know how they tried to kill him, but they tried to kill him. And now all the information's coming out every day, yada, 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 all the orgy of incompetence and all the rest of it. I'm like, I would have liked to have been wrong. But, I coined a phrase a while ago, distrust, but verify. Assume they're lying to you and then make them prove to you that they're telling you the truth. Like, that's the way we have to operate with these people, because they lie about everything. These people lie. I mean, these people can't even lie about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz showing up to a rock concert where there's 65,000 people gathered for a concert, and then they called it a rally. Like, fuck you. It's a lie. It's a lie. Stop lying to us, because we know you're lying to us. We know you're lying to us. And we know they're lying. You're lying to us. And yet you just keep thumbing your nose at us. And then you got to ask yourself the question, well, if they're acting that way, then they must know something that we don't.
Right. Don't you also
That's why I'm worried that the fix isn't.
Yeah. Don't you also think it's a symptom of this nouveau elite coming into power? A lot of these guys who are sitting at the upper echelon kind of inherited their position. They didn't have to work to create the world order post Bretton Woods, like Henry Kissinger did, or David Rockefeller did, or Zbigniew Brzezinski did. Those are right. Think what you want about those men, but those were all hardened men. The guys running the show now, they're the complete opposite of that. So is that what we're seeing today? Is just like these soft elites that just are arrogant and brazen. They don't, they're kind of like head in the air. They didn't really build anything with their hands like their forefathers did, and they're making all these mistakes and careless actions.
Well, it's a really interesting point you bring up. I'm glad you framed it that way. Actually, it's a good way of framing it. I think that we're dealing with the grandsons of the wealth generator. So the grandfather makes the wealth, the son maintains the wealth, and the grandson spends the wealth. Right. Well, I think we're definitely into the grandsons. I think the grandfathers are still around, or at least still some of them are still around, still like directing things from behind the scenes.
Just really quick, Tom. Yeah,
sure.
Did you remember back in 2020 when Trump fired Henry Kissinger from the Department of DOD board, like the DOD policy board? People didn't even know that existed, but Henry Kissinger and Madeleine Albright, all these like old time elites were still sitting making policy decisions for the DOD, but no one knew it up until then. Right. But anyways, continue.
No, that's a great point. I've forgotten all about that, so I'm really glad you brought that up. Right, but yeah, no. If you look at people like that, they have been handed these positions. They've never really been tested in their entire lives. These are people that, famously the thing, they were born on third base and thought they hit a triple. Well, no, not really. People like Ursula von der Leyen, people like Emmanuel Macron or Keir Starmer or whomever, these people are all groomed for these roles, and they knew it the entire time. So they've always known that it was going to be their turn eventually because they were being groomed for this, right? And I use that word explicitly. Okay. So that doesn't mean that they have any ability to actually do anything other than just manage, as I like to put it, the Gantt chart over at Evil Corp Central over in Davos, right? Like they've got big Microsoft project file up on the on the jumbotron at Evil Corp Central, and everybody's got a to-do list to handle on this day, and they've got these tasks that have to be completed. And they get together every once in a while. They probably even have a Zoom call because these people are are dumb enough to believe that the Chinese aren't listening to them. Like, really? Like, okay. So whatever, like it's not like they understand even, encrypted communications at this point because they don't, right? So or they don't care because they're just running the script at a, regardless of the circumstances. And every once in a while, when they're throwing a little bit of a curveball, then you actually see them having to scramble in real time and do a thing. And they don't know how to deal with that. Like, everybody was expecting Trump not to be at his own convention. They were all expecting him to be dead. Everybody acted that way. The whole thing was like laid out, the program, the way it was designed. It's not like they could change the program and the messaging and the image system for the convention or any of those things in the 3 days between the time they attempted to assassinate him and the thing started. This thing took months to plan. All right. So just like, did you really believe like that they didn't know they were going to be removing Joe Biden and bringing in Kamala Harris at the exact moment that they did? Are you kidding me? Really? Then how did all those billboards go up all around the country in support of Kamala Harris? I used to vote for Trump. You saw those, right? I voted for Trump in 2020, but I'm voting for Kamala Harris this time. Like, they were up in every city in America 4 days after she became the like, are you kidding? Those things had to be bought 4 months ago. Like, I have 2 legs. One of them plays Jingle Bells. Pick which one you think is the one that plays it. Like, give me a friggin' break here. This is just dumb. It's unbelievably dumb for them to believe that we can't see that. And then eventually someone will say it on Twitter. I can't call it X. I just can't do it. On Twitter. And it'll propagate. And if it's true, it'll propagate. And if it doesn't, if it's not true, it won't propagate. Like, and eventually, and is Twitter a perfect free speech platform? Like a lot of, people who call themselves libertarians at this point want it to be. No, it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. There's a variety of reasons why it's not perfect. Is Elon Musk your friend? Today, on these vectors, he is. On these issues, he is. Today, he's your friend. Tomorrow, maybe your enemy. Who gives a shit about tomorrow? We don't have tomorrow yet.
Yeah, but it's a net positive overall. I mean, you're starting to see the chilling effect of an open Twitter kind of make its way even onto YouTube. Like, as a content creator, I see it as well. Like, YouTube today is a lot more free than it was 4 years ago. And I can't help but think that, it's their way of competing with a more liberalized X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, right? Even TikTok, right? So the game has changed right now.
Agree.
The assassination time, we weren't even 24, 48 hours in. People were already kind of like finding inconsistencies and all these things. So like they can't play the same playbook that they were accustomed to over the last 20, 30, 40, 50, however long. Okay.
Well, because they couldn't. Go ahead. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm going to take it one step further. And did you notice the ham-fisted attempts at trying to memory hole the thing? Like, they tried on Twitter to memory hole the idea that to do away with and memory hole the video of Trump getting shot because they didn't want. And within 48 hours or within 72 hours, I think the original footage was all scrubbed from Twitter, or scrubbed from the internet, and you only had secondary sources of the audio file. Okay, so unless the people who analysis on this that have the original audio file that went live, any forensic analysis you do of the audio file at this point is suspect, simply because You're working from a second hand or third hand source. Like, and the information space, and look, everybody was involved in this and is effectively covering everything up, has the resources and the tools and the expertise at creating mis and disinformation and polluting the information space to make this, to keep everybody jumping at shadows, and as opposed to reading the code and going, that's not important. That's important. Stop. I'm not listening. But what about this stupid thing over here? It's not important. Fuck you. Don't gish gallop. That whole thing. Like, they're very good at this. They're very good at distracting people that are highly anxious and full of adrenaline. It's easy to do, and full of fear. Easy to do. And then give them the bright, shiny new object for them to go follow for 3 days. Right. And that's what they're very good at this. And you have to say no. Dexter White and I were very clear after the Trump or after the debate, for example. No, we don't get to immediately talk about Joe Biden's replacement. We need to talk about who was involved in keeping Joe Biden as president for all these months, knowing full well that he was non-compos mentis. Those people are guilty of treason. Why did we not have that conversation? We weren't allowed. So even as good as Twitter is now, right, it still isn't enough. That's how much control they have over the ability to move the Overton window. And you see it even still within Twitter's algorithm. I think the most interesting part of this week, not the most interesting part of this week, one of the most interesting parts of this week, certainly from this perspective, is Elon Musk and Rumble going after GARM and the WFA, the Worldwide Federation of Advertisers or whatever, all linked to the WEF. I just watched a great short video from Viva Fry on this. What's that?
No, just because the WFA is linked to the WEF.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
And so is GARM. So it's all one big circle jerk. They control 90% of the advertisers, blah, 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 blah. It's all bullshit. And GARM, apparently, right after the lawsuits were filed, GARM just auto disbanded itself. Why? Because these people never want to go for discovery. They don't want to go to a lawsuit. And what Viva was saying this morning, or yesterday, whenever he posted the video, and again, I don't watch Viva all that often, but every once in a while on particular issues like this, I think he's very, very good. What he was saying was like, look, this is either they know they're caught and are now trying to bleach bit everything that all their communications, and they're in that mode, or they're trying to limit the damages for the lawsuit that they know is coming because they know they were caught and they were caught in something illegal. And now the minute they stop, disband the organization, that means that they put a hard date up to how far anybody can, go after them for damages. Either way, them disbanding immediately upon anybody poking them just a little bit, and then they run and scatter. Dude, that's as much an admission of guilt as anything. And this again needs to be really dealt with we need to keep this up. And this is why, and again, this is the same interesting part about this, right? I noted, just continuing to speak about Elon Musk. Remember when Musk was trying to buy Twitter and they were trying to value it at $54 billion. He's like, no freaking way. It's not worth $1 over 25 and blah, 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 blah. And this was going on for months, and will he, won't he, and yada, yada, yada. And then they frankly steal the 2022 midterms to make sure that there was just a teeny little Republican majority. And that would be demoralizing. To make it as demoralizing as possible.
Okay.
No one would have believed that the Democrats held on to the midterm elections, but we could go with, okay, well, only 4 seats. We were supposed to get 80. Why did we only get 4? And that's the number that was probably goal seeked in order to get or some number close to that, 4 to 7 seats, in order to get it to maximum demoralization. And then they probably did some internal calculus and said, well, we own these other 4 people over here on these things. We can make sure we can get all these things we want done, right? Again, all these things are goal seek. That was on Tuesday. On Friday, Musk walks into Twitter with the kitchen sink and just buys the thing for $44 billion. Why? Why? Because he knew it wasn't he knew going for the lawsuit. It's not that they backed down on the valuation. They didn't. He just went in and overpaid. Why did he overpay? Because they wanted something about Twitter. They didn't want DMs? It to change. Yeah. Well, I think it was the Twitter DMs back then. I said that, but it may be that, it may be anything else, maybe so many other things. Like it may have been, look, we don't have time for you to screw around going through discovery into court to show these people how horrible they are. You need to get control of this thing now, fire everybody and start the process because we are now in survival mode for the 2024 election. And you have 2 years. And he just walked in with the kitchen sink on Friday, fired a whole bunch of people and started the process. And, in some ways, has he broken Twitter at a technical level? Sure. Is there a lot of issues that still exist within Twitter? Sure. But again, the advertising boycott has been crippling to their budget and their operations. And so now first you get hold of Twitter, then you go after the advertising arm of the WEF, where that's where their censorship model is. And then and by doing that, you cut off. Here's one of the things you do. First, you get a hold of Twitter, right? So let's talk strategically. How do you break their censorship control complex? First, you go after the one of the pillars of social media and just open it up, right? Now, all of a sudden, we have free flow of communications. They respond by an advertiser's boycott immediately. Okay, they try to cripple Twitter, take it out of circulation. Doesn't work. Twitter becomes more powerful and more popular than it's ever been before. Musk puts at least some form of a monetization model in place to keep the lights on. The EU responds by taking Twitter to court by changing their rules on fining them for violating their free speech protocols. Musk is like, that's nice. I'm an American company. You can put up firewalls at the border. That's your response. That's a you problem, not a me problem. Right?
Right.
Which is exactly what he should do. And of course, what you do after that is you go after the advertising boycott and show that it's illegal under U.S. law. Not that I'm a big fan of the Sherman Act, but hey, like everything else, sometimes you got to cut a deal with a dragon. So we're going to use the Sherman Act to go after these people. Fine. Again, this is what you do. And okay, let's see what happens. Because, it's already worked. So now the advertisers, and again, is this also evidence of a shift in the zeitgeist where everybody's like, look, I'm not making any money, like enforcing all this DEI and this woke shit and all the rest of it. I'm not getting any money out of it. All of our businesses are in trouble.
I think I think you're one of the first people to make this point back in 2022, or 2021, actually. When we did see that big Newsweek article about the plot to steal the election, so forth, and you made mention of the fact, that we were dealing with a cartel, but the thing with cartels is that they're unstable, and what we've seen over the course of the last 4 years is the cartel dismantle. There's still pieces of the cartel remaining, but there's obviously Elon Musk has broken out of the cartel. The Fed and JP Morgan, it's the commercial banking system is broken. Portions of Silicon Valley have left the cartel, right? Trump has.
Oh, when you dry up their funding, when you dry up their overseas funding sources, and you raise interest rates to 5.5%, and you literally execute a lot of their banks. Like, I'm sorry, but March of 2023 was a firing squad, and the 21 guns were coming from the Fed, specifically the New York Fed, against the San Francisco Fed. And to me, that was blatantly obvious. But again, to me, that it's blatantly obvious to me because I truck in that world every day. I understand the difference between the New York Fed and the San Francisco Fed. They're completely different. One is literally communist, and the other one is the one that represents Wall Street. One represents Silicon Valley and the commies in California, and the other one represents Wall Street. Now, I'll get 100 people coming at me and go, communism is just a bad brand for oligarchy. I'm like, fine, it is. I don't give a shit. People think they're communists, though. They don't think they're supporting the oligarchy when they think they're communists. So, you got to get through each layer of programming as you go along here, folks. So But thank you for bringing up the stuff that I talked about, 3-4 years ago, because I never have a chance to go back that far when I do a lot of these, because everybody wants to talk about what's happening in the moment, right? But yeah, I've always said this is again just basic everyday economic argumentation. Cartelization of an economy, of any aspect of an economy, is metastable, because eventually the incentives of the individual members of the cartel, absent or in the face of a particular stressor or absent another stressor, are going to overwhelm the needs of the cartel. And it's only when the cartel is constantly under attack by a particular enemy that they circle the wagons. OPEC is a perfect, or now BroPEC Plus is now a perfect example of that. The whole of the Western oligarchy, the old colonialist powers of Europe plus the United States, and that money is now against the oil industry. So all the oil producing nations are going, of course, gang up together in order to, and the OPEC will get stronger under those circumstances. If you want to break OPEC, stop trying to break the price of oil. Just let oil trade openly, and they'll all stab each other in the back over an extra 50,000 barrels worth of pumping every day. But they won't do that. And they won't do it because they believe that their bigger agenda, which is doing away with they believe that they can crash the global economy and then control the oil after it's all over. Look, don't kid yourself. The WEF does not want to move us beyond oil. They just want to control it. Or WEF, old colonial kings of Europe, whatever you want to call them.
Whatever label.
They're all the same. Yeah, pick a label. I don't give a shit. You want to call them the Khazari Mafia? Go right ahead. I don't give it. I don't care. You pick your label. I have mine. It's called Davos. Davos wants to control the energy trade after this is all over. And they want to kill off a few billion people in the process, because it's easier for them to control a smaller group of people than a larger group of people. And they want to make sure that the people that die the most are the ones that they don't control. They don't care about the 4.5 billion people that live along the equator. They don't care. They care about where innovation actually occurs. This is nothing against people from the equator, but when food falls from the tree, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other night. He brought this point up, and I'm not sure I completely agree with it, but there is a high correlation between innovation and harsh living conditions. And there's a counter, which is that, look, when food grows from the trees and the wildlife is abundant and it's hot, and I live in Florida, I can tell you this, for 4 days I was without power. I had no desire to do a thing because I couldn't function. Innovation doesn't happen when it's 95 degrees outside with 98% humidity and there's no air conditioning. Hate to tell you this, folks, but that's just the way it is. So Davos doesn't really give a shit about the people that live along the equator, because they're never going to generate the kind of innovation necessary to challenge them. They know this.
What about the Southeast Asian countries like Singapore or Malaysia?
Now, Singapore Singapore is a British thing. So Malaysia, Hong Kong, all those are all created. Those are all created by the British. And don't get me wrong, there's lovely people there, and they're phenomenal people. And the Asian Tiger 5 is absolutely something that everybody should watch out for. And they absolutely want control over that. Why do you think we've never left that area? Why do you think the British banks have never left Hong Kong?
Why is that?
Why do you think that British banks the British are still all over Singapore? Okay, they want control of the flow of money through those economies. And if they control the money, and they control the cost of money, and they control the flow, and they're pulling a VIG off of every currency transaction in the entire across that entire space, well, they actually in the end still control everything. That's exactly what they did with the United States, and it's my argument about LIBOR versus SOFR. The United States was never free. Britain controlled Britain was, the 19th century was basically controlling the value of the gold standard, the international gold standard. And then in the 20th century, as they finally got a central bank here in the United States, And as they moved us off the gold standard, and then eventually they gave us the London interbank offer rate for the period of the dollar reserve standards. It wasn't the dollar reserve standard; it was the LIBOR reserve standard. I just coined that phrase literally like out of whole cloth just now. Like, reframe these things when you start to think about them. What was actually controlling the price of dollars? It wasn't the Federal Reserve. On this point, I agree with Jeff Snyder completely. The Federal Reserve hasn't been in control of its own monetary policies since the growth of the Eurodollar markets in the mid-50s. Agreed. Where I disagree with Jeff is that was a free market process. It wasn't a free market process. It was created by the Marshall Plan. It was created by the underpricing of gold and the overvaluing of the dollar that came out of Bretton Woods. That was a policy. It was, and then they just let the policy circumscribe the boundary conditions of the global economy, and then shit just flowed naturally from there. And then you can apply free market principles within that box, right? Here's the boundary conditions of your problem. And now we can let free market forces operate within the box. And oh, look, it looks like the free market. But we've artificially determined what the free market, where the free market and how the free market is going to operate. That's not a free market process. That's bullshit. Okay. And if you don't think that doesn't fuel, knowing full well what the excesses are going to be, what the mistakes are going to be, they understood all this because the British have done this for fucking 400 years. For over 320 years since the formation of the Bank of England in 1694. They've done this. They understand how to manipulate FX rates to get what they want, and to have that underscore and undergird their foreign and domestic, their foreign policy and everybody else's domestic policy. So you just create an artificial boundary condition, let it operate, and then blame it on capitalism. Why? So you can then take the underclass that you've created and use them as your useful idiots in your war against the middle class, and you call it communism.
Yep.
This isn't hard. If I was Emperor Palpatine, this is what I would do. And if I can figure this shit out, you don't think that the people who've been running this system for the last 350 years are good at it? Is that air you think you're breathing?
Yeah, it's all about the getting the underclass or middle class fighting with one another, and then kind of like letting the elites just go scot free.
Well, no, the elites get the underclass to fight for them. Right. There's always a natural incentive structure or a natural relationship. Richard Poe is talking about this in his latest book, and I'll give Richard a shout out because I've now read it. And the book is great. It's called "How the British Invented Communism and Blamed It on the Jews." Okay, and it's more about how the British have used the mechanisms, how they've used the class warfare as a means by which to affect their foreign policy over the years. And he makes a very, very salient point, and not just him, but other people watching this over the years, which is that there's an alignment of incentives between the lower classes and the upper classes to betray the burgeoning middle class, the bourgeoisie, because they're the ones that, if you allow the bourgeoisie to grow, then they exert political power and they overthrow the upper class. So what do? You set the upper classes sets the lower classes against the bourgeoisie in order to stifle the growth of the bourgeoisie. And what are we seeing today? Where is the middle class? Where is the effect, the ruinous effect of government policy all across the West targeted?
The upper middle class,
wealth, small business owners, everyone. And they just ripped the friggin' mask off completely. They did it for a long time and everybody was like, why are you doing this? This is the dumbest thing imaginable. You're killing small businesses and blah, 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 blah. And, well, we're trying to help the poor. No, you're trying to destroy us. And unfortunately, a lot of poor people, they fall for it. There's disenfranchised, the victim crowds, and they just target individual victim crowds. And knowing full well that when you set up systems like this, you set up patterns of abuse within the society, the reactions, the psychological damage that's done within families and within society, within communities and whatnot, the deracinization and all of it. It's all really predictable across human behavior. And
Right.
you know, you don't have to, they're not Snidely Whiplash up there twirling their freaking mustaches going, and today we're going to take out the middle class in Peoria. And then tomorrow we're going to work on Gary, Indiana. And then on Thursday, we're going to work on Charleston, South Carolina. No, they just know that if they set the boundary conditions up in a particular way and then let the clockwork run, they're going to get 85% of what they want. And then they just fine tune it along the way. Buy a politician here, put a terrible Supreme Court justice on the bench there, start kill an Eastern European president over there. I mean, this is the way it works.
Yeah,
And,
bodies
you know,
have been falling. Like all of these world leaders, like the Iranian president helicopter crash, the Japanese, what was it, the ex-Japanese prime minister a couple of years back. The assassination attempt on Trump, like you alluded
on Trump,
to,
Robert Fico of
this
Slovakia.
Is all spy war. This is all spy games.
Wait,
go ahead.
Viktor Orban. They tried to go after Orban, and they made multiple attempts on Putin. They have gone after everyone. I'm surprised. I don't know how Nigel Farage is still alive. Only because I think they understand that they already have England so like wrapped up that Farage is irrelevant. And maybe they don't need to kill him. I don't know. Or maybe they've already threatened Farage so many times that, you know, he's only willing to operate at a particular, you know, up to the limit of which he's willing to, you know, sacrifice his life. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Strange things are happening if you're paying attention, but those people are not paying attention. I think it really boils down to just that. If you don't pay attention, all these things seem kind of random and disjointed. But when you're someone who actually pays attention to the number one, the markets and the geopolitics, you start seeing connections, and you can't come up with a different conclusion other than the fact that, you know, there are things going on behind the scenes that we may never get the answers to. Like like us as the public, like we will never know. But
no, we'll never know on purpose. We know who shot Kennedy. Okay. We know. They're never going to admit it, folks. Ever. It's an entire industry of how to manipulate and destroy the directed, and it's a way to distract and destroy energy. You deflect energy off of from the main source of the problem, which is the Kennedy assassination will never be solved. Just like they seed things like we never went to the moon or flat earth or any of these things. These are all versions of the same thing. No, folks, truly, the earth isn't flat. And truly, the Van Allen belts aren't that freaking dangerous. We can go to the moon. Period. Sorry, it's just physics. Okay. So, you know, and I also believe that nuclear bombs are real. I'm sorry. I'm a normie. Sue me. Maybe because the risk of not believing in nuclear weaponry is a little greater than believing in, it's just dumb. I
don't want to find out. Yeah, I don't want to.
Yeah, how about I don't want to find out that I'm wrong. So saying, like, you know, there's not enough. I can't order enough SPF 50,000 sunblock from Amazon. I just can't do it. I don't know, you know. So, you know, where was I? I don't know.
Well, you know what, Tom? Let's just this is a finance and markets podcast, allegedly, right? So I want to take you back to the economy.
Sure.
So let's talk about the economy for a bit, just so we can have some meat and potatoes here for the audience that came for that. You did see the yen carry trade.
You've lost them.
That was the big story of the week, right?
But you lost them already. Like, you know, we're 45 minutes into this. They're gone. Come on, folks. Come back. Let's talk about the yen carry trade now.
Yeah, we'll talk about it now. This will be a front and center on the teaser. But
sorry.
I'm going to keep this. This is all going to be uncut. So this is great content.
I'm doing my best here. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you
So
yen carry trade unwind. It seems to the market's reacted to it for pretty violently, but it seems to be over. Is it over yet? Has the market crash come to this short is this a short lived thing? And then I think I saw a couple of tweets of yours kind of implying that this people are overestimating the amount of rate cuts they can expect from the Fed as a result, and regardless of the fact. Do you
yeah,
still hold that view?
yeah, I do. I'm looking at the yen right now, and it's 146.56. So we've had a nice bounce back up to 147, and I was going to roll over. The yen market is still very weak, but I think the next time we hit a move down in a move up slash down in the down versus on the number go down, but yen go up in value because JPY is in the denominator. I think we're easily could be headed for the 130s or even 125 on the dollar yen cross. The next target in this will be the ECB. The first phase of the carry trade unwind was the dollar yen carry trade. It was the most prominent. It was the widest. We went from 0.25% to 5.5%. But now that the long end of the yield curve in the US has come down dramatically, and the Japanese 10-year is trading this morning at 85 basis points, down from about 108 basis points. That carried. I saw a thing from JP Morgan. The 70% of the yen carry trade has been unwound. Well, that's the dollar yen carry trade. What about the euro yen carry trade? Well, the euro yen crosses dropped dramatically. And what's interesting, and as I was doing this for my patrons on Wednesday, I was looking at the euro Swiss franc cross, and what I noted, and that has been since the Swiss National Bank began cutting rates before everybody else. That was to support the ECB and the Bundesbank. Okay. Because we saw a massive drop in the Swiss franc versus the euro. So that was propping the euro up and keeping bond yields in Europe up, or keeping bond prices up and keeping euro yields suppressed, right? That trade is turned over as well. I'm going to check on the euro CHF as we sit here talking so amiably, because this one's important. If we get so we've gotten a spike bottom in that, and a reversal on the daily chart, and we're going to be moving back up to 95 cents. Yeah, I'm looking at that. That if the Swiss National Bank is out of bullets to defend the euro, then who's going to absorb the capital outflow when the euro yen rolls over again, right? The euro has, so here we are. We're looking at a Friday close where the euro is going to close at just over 109. The yen's going to close below 147. And that's nice. Again, it's not as bad as it was on Monday, but it's still there. The dollar index is trading at 103. Dollar still looks reasonably strong. It's like right in the band between 102 and 105. Like it's like trading right around average true range at this point, right? And so I do try to sprinkle my commentary with trader speak so they understand that I literally have tried trading every system out there on purpose, just so you guys know that I know what Elliott waves are and I know what this is. And I think it's all bullshit personally, but and anybody who knows how I do my technical analysis, that it's just trend following and reversal signals, and everything else does not matter, and looking out through time. But I look at all of that and I say, well, mission accomplished by the BOJ. They got the yen down 9 points. They got the Nikkei down a couple, they took some of the froth off the Nikkei. And so what? Like here we are on, Friday, and, the Dow's going to trade flat for the week. Right. And it's not that it's over. It's that we had a bounce. But what really unwound here was the weakness in the yen. Now that's going to set up a new dynamic. It's a bone to China, because China and Japan compete along a lot of markets. And with the yen at 162 and wasn't a whole lot of room for China to devalue the yuan, right? When they need to loosen up on credit in order to try and keep their property market from imploding. So this is going to give China a lot of breathing room. In my mind, this is a geopolitical move. It's not just a survival move from the Bank of Japan. It is a survival play for the Bank of Japan, but it serves multiple purposes. One, it makes energy a lot cheaper for Japan. Note, we're going to close over $79 a barrel Brent this week, dollars per barrel Brent. That's bad for a lot of people, most notably Europe. While everything else was melting down on Monday, oil prices were not melting down. So everything was about the cost of the price of energy. The Japanese are now in a position to start driving home and locking in cheap energy for the next 6 to 9 months, right? They're going to go out on the oil futures curve, and they're going to be buying and securing at these prices. And if they're not doing so yet, that means that the Ministry of Finance is going to drop another $40 billion on the market the minute the shorts pile back in, and they're going to crush them again and push the yen back into the 130s. And again, the geopolitical angle on this is the following. Trump already came out and said, look, China is not our responsibility to defend. If they want to be defended by the United States, they can pay for it. It's a very Trumpian thing to say. I think
Taiwan, right?
No, Taiwan. What did I say?
China.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not. Taiwan is not our responsibility. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Taiwan is not our responsibility to defend. If they want us to defend them, they can pay for it. Very Trumpian thing to say. All right, now that's the biggest dog whistle. That look, at the end of the day, this is going to be a nice, big negotiated settlement between the United States and China over trade policy. The United States wants to reshore. There's a lot of stuff there's a lot of stuff that has to happen. Where everybody's moving to a two-tiered monetary system, whether they want to admit it or not. I don't know. I don't have time to go into all of it today. I've talked about this on my podcast with Vince Lanci multiple times about the nuts and bolts of how we would set up a two-tiered quasi-closed capital account system in the United States that they currently have in Japan, which is the fact that effectively you have domestically circulating yen and you have internationally circulating yen. And they can have that system even with an open capital account because Mr. and Mrs. Watanabe buy Japanese, as long as the Ministry of Finance and the BOJ make the cost of capital and the cost of investment in Japan balance that out well enough that they get their little teeny real yield over inflation. Mr. and Mrs. Watanabe are not going to buy American. You force them overseas. And now that money and that's when Japan gets into trouble. So that money has to go back in. So the reason they did this was to start repatriating capital back to Japan. A lot of Japanese corporates are sitting in money market funds on their quarterly profits at 5.5% in 3-month T-bills. I don't know about you, but if I'm the Ministry of Finance, I want that money back in Japan. If I'm the Bank of Japan, I want that in Japan. I want Toyota reinvesting in Japan. I don't want that money just sitting in a bank account making 5% over in the United States. So you drop the yen. That makes it easier for China to export over the tariffs. It's a way of getting around the Biden administration's hostility towards China by keeping the Trump tariffs in place. Right? It's a way to ratchet down the tension. China can then export a little bit more. Everybody's a little happier. They may even be able to loosen up on credit, blah, 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 blah. Great. The United States gets the Japanese to unwind the yen carry trade, which at this point is the primary source of funding for more leveraged euro dollars, offshore dollars, because you've unwound that, and that's not going to then be sent back overseas and levered up and sit in. Look, the bad guys are doing this. The good guy, everybody's doing it. Now you unwind that again. So the first thing the Fed had to do was get rid of the cheap source of euro dollars, which was zero bound interest rates. Move interest rates to 5.5%, start starving the markets. The Bank of Japan gets the signal. Slowly but surely, they start exiting QE. Kuroda is moved out to pasture. Kishida, his right-hand man is supposed to take over. He defers and says, no, I helped the architect of this 30-year QE. I'm not the right guy for this. I'm going to follow my sword for the good of Japan, and I'm going to follow my boss into retirement. Ueda takes over, completely different guy, and comes in and slowly but surely starts executing a tighter monetary policy for Japan. That was a very big tell. When Kishida walked away from taking over the Bank of Japan, that meant you could bet. I would have I'm not a betting man other than when I'm at the poker table, which I don't do very much of anymore. But if I were to put money on anything, I would have put money on that Ueda was going to support Powell rather than support Janet Yellen at the Treasury. It was clearly doing QE and yield curve control. Now, once you have that picture in your head, you knew that we were eventually going to get to where we were on Monday, that eventually the Bank of Japan was going to raise rates and the Ministry of Finance was going to dump foreign exchange reserves and defend the yen. This was going to happen. And they were going to get the most bang for their buck they could. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm going to spend $40 billion, I'm not going to spend $40 billion and have it fizzle. I'm just not going to hand it to my enemies. I want it to create an effect, an outsized effect. So the yen market was completely and utterly bearish. Everybody was expecting that double top to break to the upside and the yen to run to 180. And it was as unbalanced a market on Monday or Sunday night as the oil market was a few weeks ago when oil first hit $76 a barrel, and Zero Hedge is out there going to the commitment of traders report has the specs 95% short. And I'm like, yeah, there's going to be a rally in oil. And then lo and behold, over the next 4 weeks, we saw friggin', $15 move in the price of oil from 75 up to like $88 a barrel, for $13 in 3 weeks. So same thing happened in the end. They're like, there it is. That's going to be your moment. Like, boom. And the minute it happened, the whole thing started crumbling because everybody was leveraged short. Now they have to flip and go long. And then it just starts a cascading effect and a waterfall down. And that's what we saw on Monday and Tuesday. The guy who came out from the BOJ on Tuesday night and said, well, we'll never raise interest rates when the markets are unstable was not Ueda. It was not the head of the Bank of Japan. It was an older guy. It was one of the old guard. Okay. Who probably got a call from Janet Yellen saying, stop this. And so he did. And we're in the bounce period. You've got to panic. You get a bounce. That bounce, are we back at 162 on the yen? Hell, the yen could run to 155 and this bounce wouldn't be over. It would still be, as Martin Armstrong would put it, a reaction high. After a big bounce, after a big drop, then there's a reaction high, and then there's potentially another rollover. That's very normal market behavior. We've had a bounce. We've had a bounce in the Nikkei. We've had a bounce in the Dow. We've had a bounce in all of these asset classes, but the froth is coming off the market. So step one, I tweeted this out at Luke Roman the other day when Luke was going on about something, and I just, and he was basically presenting the opposite argument that the yen was screwed and blah, blah. I'm like, no, they got all the money in the world. This is about taking out Janet Yellen. The Fed is not going to, the Fed is not down with any of this. The Fed's not going to reinstitute QE or any of the other rotten nonsense. It's dumb. I'm sorry. It's a dumb take. I don't care who says it. I don't care. I mean, Powell could come out tomorrow and say it. And I would still say it's a dumb take. I don't give a shit. Like, two things. One, QE is not on the horizon from the Fed anytime soon. So the first thing that the Fed had to do in this whole rate hike cycle was kill the idea of the Fed put, that the Fed was going to come in and support the markets if they ever started to melt down. Well, has that happened yet? No. Every time they've screamed for 7 rate cuts and moved the friggin' bond, the yield curve 65 or 100 basis points in order to blackmail Powell into giving them their rate cuts, he's been like, yeah, that's nice. Close the fucking door. Fuck your puts. Like, how many times do I have to say this? He keeps doing it. We had a similar move in the SOFR futures curve from the middle of November to December to New Year's Eve last year, about 50 basis point move in the entire curve in 6 weeks. We've had that same move in the SOFR futures curve since the middle of June. Again, everybody like screaming, we need an emergency rate cut. We need money. We need to, like, fuck you, babies. The only people screaming for that are the ones who want to kill you. How do you think they're buying DAs? How do you think they're rigging elections? How do you think they're paying for Antifa flash mobs all over the world? How do you think they're doing this, folks? And who do they bring out on freaking Bubble Vision? The very fucking people that have done this to you. So the first thing you do is you kill the Fed put, but then you had to kill the BOJ put. And how do you do that? Well, you don't do that all at once. Otherwise, you destroy Japan. That's not acceptable. So they take their time. They wait for everybody to the BOJ sets this up assiduously, slowly, bit by bit, every day, every meeting. The doom porners are out there going, Japan doesn't know what they're doing. Like, really? Huh, that's interesting. Okay. Keep looking at that debt to GDP ratio as if that actually means a goddamn thing, because it doesn't. The U.S. exited World War II with a 222% debt to GDP ratio. We ran the world with it.
As long as someone's willing to buy the debt out there, the debt to GDP ratio can go as high as it needs to be.
It could be $1 billion. It does not matter. Exactly. It's a nice talking point. It's a good starting point for where your analysis should be, but it's not the end of everything, because at the end of the day, it's a global economy built on a global flow of dollars, and the individual countries themselves are all managing this stuff vis-a-vis where their trading incentives lie. And then Japan is sensitive to the US, to China, to a lesser extent, Europe. Now, you kill the BOJ put. That's what's in process right now. Oh, the Bank of Japan will always come in and do something dumb to support the market. There'll always be cheap yen. You get a generation of people who always believe that they can just go out and whenever they want, go out and buy cheap yen from the BOJ and go lever it up at, for, a couple hundred basis points in the carry trade. Like, guys, how old are you? Danny, how old are you?
36.
If you might ask. How much?
36.
36. Okay. So your entire life, when you were 4 years old, you could go out with your lemonade stand money. You're 6 years old, Danny. Can you go out with his lemonade stand money and go buy cheap yen and go get 200 basis points on the friggin' carry trade? Your entire life. You have your whole imprinting. There's an entire generation of people who have been imprinted on this market structure. They've been grown up on it. They have no idea that they don't know that it's not real, because it's always been real. So you believe in it until it's no longer there. So you got to get rid of the BOJ put. The last thing you got to get rid of is the ECB. You get rid of the Fed put to get rid of the BOJ put to execute the ECB. Because the ECB is the problem. You kill the ECB, you kill the WEF. You kill the WEF, you kill the globalist. You kill the globalist, you kill City of London. You kill City of London, you kill the friggin' Vatican. You kill the Vatican, you kill Washington. This is how it's done. It's an order of operations.
Yep.
It's an order of operations. It has to happen in a particular way. Okay? Like it or not, we don't have, and all we can do, we do have power, right? I was about to say we don't have the power to execute this plan. Only the Fed does. We do have the power. We have the power by responding to the incentives that the Fed puts in front of us. So save your money in short-term T-bills. Wait. Be in gold. Understand what's happening. The world is bifurcating. The Fed needs a higher gold price. I've argued this point in how are you going to balance the budget of the United States? How are you going to pay for that $35 trillion debt? How are you going to service that? You're going to service that with dollars? Really? No, you're going to service that with gold. But you're not going to do it at $2,500 an ounce gold. You're going to do it at $20,000 an ounce gold. Oof. Don't be stupid. Well, I don't know if it's 20,000, maybe 7,000, maybe 9,000, maybe 10,000. It's going to be some number.
Who knows?
My point is, Right. It's going to be some number. It's going to be a negotiated settlement. And we, as the people who have lost faith in our governments and our institutions, are going to decide what the leverage ratio of the Fed's balance sheet, M2, to our savings is going to be, and the reserve assets are going to be, in order for us to be willing to go back in and buy a U.S. 10-year Treasury note at 4%. I don't know what the gold number is that makes that happen, but it's not going to be $2,500 an ounce.
Are you in the market for gold and silver? Then if so, please consider Miles Franklin. They are my gold and silver dealer of choice. So not only do they have super competitive prices that you're going to have a really hard time finding elsewhere, but then they also have top-notch customer support. I know Andy Schechtman, the owner of Miles Franklin, top-notch guy. I wouldn't be recommending them to you if I didn't have faith in their product. But what you really want to do, however, you want to email them at info@milesfranklin.com, and you want to say that Capital Cosm sent me in the description line, because when you do that, you can get access to their special pricing sheet. You want to get that special pricing sheet because you're going to get special prices that you won't find on the website itself. So email them at info@milesfranklin.com. Tell them that Capital Cosm sent you, and you won't be heckled with spam emails, etc. There's no commitment necessary. I promise you that. And with that said, I will let you get back to the video.
I don't know if it's going to be, 10, 12, 15, 20. I don't know whether the leverage ratio of the Fed's balance sheet is going to be 10-1 to the gold reserves, 20-1, 4-1, 2-1. I don't know. I just know it's a lot lower than it is currently, which is like 16-1. So about $500 billion worth of gold against an $8 trillion balance sheet and a $35 trillion US debt. And if we have to sell some of our gold reserves to domestic investors over the course of time in the form of gold-backed bonds, then it may be even bigger than it may, then that bottom number is a moving target. What if we have to sell off 25% of the world of the US gold supply to the people in the form of gold-backed tips a la Judy Shelton, and then it's $400 billion and an $8 trillion balance sheet. That's a 20-1 leverage ratio. And what if the people demand a 3-1 leverage ratio? Well, that means the price of gold is going up by 6 times, or the Fed's balance sheet is shrinking by 6 times. Take your pick. It could be shrink the balance sheet by 30%, let the gold price rise 5 times. Bob's your uncle. Here we are, $12,000 gold and a $2.5 trillion balance sheet on the, you know what I mean? Like, that's the number. Like, that's the math. That's the real math. That's what's coming. And if we don't understand, and everybody who tells me that I'm wrong about this, I say to them, then why are you saying that when the BRICS do this, that it's a good thing, but it'll never happen here in the US? Are you kidding me? Do you think that JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and all those guys on Wall Street don't understand this? You really think that I hate to say it, the motherfuckers in the city of London who have run this exact same scam on the world 3 friggin' times previously don't understand this? Really?
And when you say
and I'm the crazy one.
Yeah, when you say City of London, Tom, I think it's important for the audience to know that there is it differs from the actual London city itself. Mm-hmm. City of London is a small enclave within London.
Yes.
Which has its own set of rules.
Square mile. Yeah. Same thing with Washington, D.C. It's an administrative state basically outside the United States. Same thing with the Vatican, outside of Italy. They're effectively their own city states, with their own rules. And they were designed, and they were set up that way on purpose.
Yep.
And, and again, that starts going us down a lot of rabbit holes that then people will go jump down and go way down into as to what that all means. And that's fine. You're more than welcome to go there, but you don't actually have to, because what you have to realize is that they are different. They are the centers of power. Sure. And they can be destroyed. That's that simple. They can be destroyed. Why? How can they be destroyed? Well, I just gave you the blueprint for it.
And I think you're the only person that actually provided a blueprint. Most people just kind of like make diagnosis of the problem and just, all right, there it is. Have at it. But
I tried to make Danny, I only put the blueprint together because it's the only thing that you can't go down the route that I've gone. with the analysis and not go, so what's the fucking point? What's the end goal? What's the end game? What's the strategy? You can't be like, oh, well, this is what I'm seeing. I don't know what it means. Derp, 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 and then you walk and then you walk off the show. Like, you're gonna look like an asshole. But if you say, oh no, this is what's going on. Now I'm going to poke the snake. Now I'm going to say, these things imply this. And then you sit back and you wait. Next month we come back. Oh, look, these things occurred and they still imply the same things. And here we are 3 years later. Again, it ain't about me. Maybe I just have because of this shit that I've done my entire life. I've trained myself to be the guy to do this analysis. And maybe this is all I'm good at. Maybe this is the only thing in my life that I'll ever be any good at. Maybe. This may be my one-hit wonder. I don't know, and I don't really care. I just know that this is the thing, right? In this moment in time. So you do it, you run the process, you run the analysis, you do the thing, you come to the conclusion, you put it out there, you let people tell you you're crazy, and then you come back 6 months later and go, you still think I'm crazy? I'm not going to sit here and go, you called me crazy. I don't care. I don't care. It's just a thing. It's an idea. Like, we should talk about ideas. And again, it's not about, I want people to be inspired by the ideas that have been presented, to go out and either challenge me and tell me that I'm wrong, so that we can have an honest discussion in either on Twitter or on a podcast or whatever. And I have people on my podcast who don't agree with me. Caitlin Long and I have gone 2 hours on the Federal Reserve. Great. I love it when Caitlin comes in armed with a whole bunch of questions that she wants to, it's great. I think it's fantastic. I never have more fun than chatting with that woman. Right. Or you are inspired to go, no, Tom, I think you're right, because I see this, and this, and I see that. And that so explains this thing that confused me last week. I'm like, thank you, because I didn't see that. And so now, by doing it this way, what have I done? I've created exactly the kind of thing that scares the shit out of them. A hive mind of people who are able to, going back to exactly what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. We have a milieu in which to debunk their bullshit in real time. I just happen to be doing it now with bond yields and FX crosses, both of which I never wanted to become even remotely an expert in. And I still would never consider myself an expert in these things. Layman plus at best. I'm just thinking strategically. That's why I go out and get people like Vince to put the nuts and bolts together for me, because that's not my gig. That's what this is about, right? And then we sit down, we have a conversation, we move to the next conversation, and we move through in time, and hopefully I can stay one step ahead of them because my analysis has been correct. But the minute my analysis turns out to be incorrect, right, I'm going to have to shift, and I'm going to have to go, nope. Oh, that's not right. But I haven't been yet. And I've been trying. I keep searching for that moment where I really think I'm wrong. I keep searching for it. I really do. Because you got to want to falsify your hypothesis, right? Your hypothesis no hypothesis is ever fully falsified. This is that whole, by the way, science is not consensus, folks. Okay. And nothing is ever true.
It's only falsified by the degree of evidence that you have.
Right.
And the degree of evidence that you're willing to accept to falsify it. So some folks use 95%, some folks use 99%, whatever it is, right. But it's never 100%. It's impossible to be 100%.
And for engineers, by the way, they only need a certain level in order to go out and build bridges with, because at some point you have to accept the risk that whatever it is that you've built, or whatever hypothesis you're running with, can we turn that into something in real time that can make people's lives better, right? And that's what engineers do. They take theoretic science and they turn it into applied real world shit. And then we get stuff. And maybe they're working with a 94% complete theory. That should be enough to build speakers with. And then we can listen to music and, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be perfect, right? It just has to be good enough. We may be able to refine speaker technology with that last 6%, but we'll get there when it's cost effective to do so. Not now. That's the Pareto rule. about all of this. So again, my geopolitical and market analysis is just Pareto, folks. I'm just kind of iterating on Pareto, and I'm not trying to go too far ahead of where I currently am, because you can get lost in that real easy. You can wind up being one of the people that we complained about at the beginning of at the thing. I'm right, and this is the world, and blah 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 blah, and I'm a Bitcoin and I'm a Powell Maxi now. Like, no, I'm not. Like, I fully expect to have to go to war with the Federal Reserve in 2028. I'm okay with that. Just not doing it now.
What are some book recommendations, Tom, that you suggest people look into? I've been asking this question for all my guests. So if there's like a book or two or three, however many you want.
I mean, what do you, it depends on what,
just make them a better investor. Just whatever you think.
I don't read investing books, Danny. I don't read investing books. I don't read. I mean, I mean, if you've everybody should read, the basics of Austrian economics. I don't care if it's I wouldn't say you read Human Action or Man, Economy, and State, but dude, read economics in real life. Read Economics for Real People by Gene Callahan or the Harry Hazlitt book. Right? I mean, these are just to get an understanding of the basics. How do people act and why do they act? And how they respond to incentives, practical, everyday, boring, old, the basics of what to be true about human behavior, and then start seeing it in real time. Should you read should you read Edward Bernays? Should you read, Nudge? Should you read all this friggin' communist crap to try and, this pop psychology bullshit that they try to run the society based on? Sure, if you want to know what their method is. But for me, I learned a lot of this stuff by just sitting at the gaming table, the board gaming table, one, and two, I read a lot of Philip K. Dick and a lot of Grant Morrison and Jorge Luis Borges. I read those guys, Kafka. I read all of those guys that literally challenged all of my perceptions about how the world operates. And I started that when I was 13. I mean, this is foundational literature for me, right? And so every day, Phil Dick just becomes more and more prophetic but it not necessarily from a technology standpoint, but absolutely from a spiritual and cultural malaise. I mean, Phil Dick was talking about the destruction of the male ethos back in the early 1960s. I mean, about the destruction of men as in a vibrant world, even before feminism exploded. He was talking about schizophrenia deeply, the schizophrenia and ennui that comes from the overabundance of education and things like Martian Time Slip. I reread Martian Time Slip the other day for the first time since I was 15, and I was oh, by the way, here's the American male meaning crisis in 200-page novel. So books to read, pick any of the top 10 books by Philip K. Dick, read them all. You'll learn so much about the 20th century, about what it is to be a man. You'll see it. Read The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. Read Proof Rock, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Two of the most important poems of the 20th century, because they presage everything we're gonna go through. Eliot was 50 years ahead of his time.
Okay, we'll have all those books linked down below. Tom, it's been a pleasure having you on. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap things up?
If I go much longer, I'll probably say something I'm not supposed to say. So I'll probably leave it here.
We can always edit it out.
No, I'm fine. No, dude, I'm good. Thank you much for the invite, and I really do appreciate it, as always. So it was good to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. If you guys enjoyed this content, be sure to type "Go Tom Go" in the comment section below. And Tom, where can we find you?
You can follow me over at the blog, which I have not been watering nearly enough recently, at tomluongo.me or goldgoatsandguns.com, where the public podcast all get cross-posted over there. You can sign up for the Patreon at Patreon/goldgoatsandguns, where most of the content now, that's not a public podcast, comes out. We do twice weekly market reports. Sometimes I do, private blog posts and podcasts for my people on off days, but we do those every Wednesday and every Sunday, going over the state of the technical state of markets, what's happening. And then, of course, the monthly newsletter. And then you can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728, where according to Grok as an AI, I am an abusive account.
An abusive account. Who are you abusing?
I guess I'm just abusive. I don't know. I'm getting the vapors over here. It's okay. Yeah, I don't know. I am. I mean, it's like I'm a terrible. My public persona on Twitter is it's terrible. I should probably tone it down just a little bit. But other than that, there it is.
Cool. Well, guys, if you enjoyed this content, give us a like, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with Tom's take? If you agree, let me know. If you don't agree, tell me why. Interested to get your take here. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It'd be really great to up the subscriber count so we can get more guests like Tom on the show. And if you're getting value out of this stuff, so you don't miss an episode, right? So be sure to hit that subscribe button. We do post daily videos, or just about, so you don't want to miss a video moving forward. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.